What is up, FunAhead fans? Today we are back in the FunAhead headquarters wearing our Monday best, and we are working on, actually, not a Porsche for once, we're working on this super old jet ski. Stay tuned. Alright, so if you've watched my channel in the past, you'll know that I've put out some intermittent jet ski content. I'm quite a big jet ski and snowmobile fan. Actually, I'm pointing to my snowmobile. It's like way over there and you can't even see it. I love power sports. I love things that go fast. I featured a vehicle on the channel before, which is called a Kawasaki X2, which is a very early jet ski, stand-up jet ski. It doesn't have the traditional rising, lowering handle like what you think of when you think of a stand-up jet ski. Nonetheless, it is a stand-up, and they're very fun and agile little jet skis. So just a little bit of background, the Kawasaki X2 came with a 650cc engine, which was, you know, kind of the standard, actually pretty spicy motor of the time. In the 90s, Kawasaki came out with a 750cc, which is what is in this jet ski. It, of course, being a 750cc, is quite a bit more powerful than the 650. However, they're basically a modular engine, meaning they all share the same size. Basically, the 750 is just a more bored out version of the 650, and the engine is basically the exact same size. There's some differences on the internals, of course, but one motor can be moved over to the other. This jet ski right here, which actually has been in my life for a very long time, it belongs to very, very, very good friends of ours. This is a 1995 Kawasaki STS, and it has the 750 engine in it. Actually, the engine that is in this one currently is from a 96 Kawasaki SS, which was basically their most hopped up jet ski at the time. So this is on its second engine. However, this jet ski recently had a steering cable breakage, which doesn't sound that severe, but this thing's not worth much and it's quite old. So our family friends decided, okay, it's time to just get a new jet ski because the steering cable in this costs about $100, and this whole entire jet ski might be worth a few $100s. So they were like, all right, threw in the towel, time to just get a new jet ski altogether. But basically, our very good family friend gave me this jet ski very graciously. So I know you guys don't love jet ski content. It's been tested on this channel before and hasn't done very well, but you know what? I love jet ski content, so therefore I'm making a jet ski video. Today's task is to take the engine out of that jet ski. The engine's perfectly good. Let's take that 750 and move it into an X2. We don't have the X2 here quite yet. It's not the one that we rebuilt on the channel a couple years ago. We have two of them. The one that we rebuilt a couple years ago is still running very well. That thing is a champion. But the other one that we own started to have some issues this year. Now that we have the opportunity to take the sweet, spicy 750 out of this one, we decided, okay, instead of fixing up the 650 that is in the X2 that's acting up, we might as well just pull that motor, set it aside, maybe rebuild it for later, and then take the 750 and put it in that one. We're gonna probably run into some issues here and there. Probably some electrical harness related issues we'll come across, but nonetheless, I think we'll be able to more or less just swap one over to the other. Plus, we're going to take care of a lot of the reliability issues that these engines did have at the time. All right, I have talked for quite a few minutes now. I'm just going to go ahead and shut up, and we will get into pulling the motor out of this thing. Okay, so let's take a look at the engine. Here is that beautiful 750cc engine that I mentioned earlier that came out of another jet ski. We did that swap a couple of years ago now, and it's been running wonderfully ever since. I'm going to go ahead and start just removing stuff, getting everything out of the way so that we can eventually get to the point of pulling the engine out. It's pretty funny when you look at the entire picture of this. I mean, here's the entire jet ski, and then this right here, this little motor is the thing that powers the entire ski. Sort of comical when you think about it. And honestly, this wasn't one of the fastest jet skis out there. This thing will probably get up to in the low 40s mile an hour range. But once it was up on plane, you know, it was a pretty fun jet ski, and it could not hold a line. This thing just slid out like crazy, handled terribly, but it made for a very fun jet ski just because of the fact that, you know, you could spin it around really easily, and it was just a fun, very playful little jet ski. Of course, you could throw yourself off of it pretty quickly as well, but that's beside the point. That just adds to the fun, of course. See, as you can tell, I very much love these things. Whether it's be old ones or the new ones, they're just all fun. They're just all fun. All right, I'm going to shut up now, and we'll get to wrenching. Let's do it. So here's the engine sitting on the bench. So some of the parts need to actually be transferred over. If you've ever worked with these engines before, you'll know that actually the main kind of harness that goes to like the stator, for example, that needs to go with the engine computer and with the engine. The engine computer itself has several major things that connect to it to be able to control it. For example, actuating the starter. This particular jet ski also had the trim control, which obviously you needed to have some level of input into this computer to be able to output to the trim control motor. So that is also one of these. I'm not sure which one exactly. And also it did have a gauge cluster with a tach. So basically that's where I'm at right now, is deciphering what's what with regards to that. What needs to come off of that ski and go with this engine in order to have this engine run properly inside of the X2. I would like to transfer over this piece. It does have the trim control, but of course you can have that disconnected. It doesn't actually matter. And then also, because X2s have a ATV style thumb throttle, which actually gets kind of tiring when you're riding around, we're going to convert that X2 to this trigger throttle as well. So both of these things on the bar are going over this because it'd be nice to have this because it's probably necessary with that engine. Well, we are back working on the Kawasaki X2, one of our two X2s, and overall it's in pretty solid shape, and we actually put new seat material on it and HydroTurf on it this past year, and unfortunately that's when the engine started acting up. So under the hood of this you can see a very similar engine to what came out of the 750, except for this is the 650. Right here in the front we have the oil tank and fuel tank, battery of course, which we will likely be replacing. This one was manufactured in 420, nice. And then there's the engine that we will be removing from this. It kind of has an unknown issue at the moment. It starts and runs, but it doesn't really want to make power. When you actually get into the throttle, it just kind of falls on its face. Cannot get this thing planed out. And what's interesting is it actually has plenty of compression, so it's potentially a carburation issue, which we hadn't had in the past, and it just was kind of like an all of a sudden change. So it's potentially like a reed valve issue or something along those lines. Nonetheless, today's goal is to get actually all of this out of here and kind of start prepping for installation of the 750. Then we will just give the inside of this area a really good clean and then kind of start pulling apart all of the wiring and throttle cable and everything that we're not reusing from this ski. We are converting this thing to premix. It's currently direct oil injection via the pump, which is right down here. Those are a known failure item on these engines. They will eat your motor up completely because you don't have any oil inside the engine anymore. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to pulling all this stuff out of this thing. Alrighty, well, as you can see, that was fairly quick and painless. We have the engine now sitting over in the other room there. Next step is going to be to tear off all of the old electrical components that were X2 related, including this harness right here that goes up to the bars. We no longer need this throttle or this start kill switch, and we no longer need this box or that ignition box. So all that needs to come out right now, and then we will be ready to take this ski outside and give it a super good cleaning. Well, everybody, and I cannot emphasize this enough, tee-hee. Look at the difference between before and after. I don't know why I just said that. So off camera, I've been doing a decent bit of just kind of cleaning things besides obviously the inside of the hull. I swapped out the output shaft flange. The one that was in the X2 was in terrible shape. Here is the output shaft flange that came out of the X2. Obviously not in the best of shape. Aside from that, basically just been cleaning all the engine components. So now it is at the point where I'm going to begin putting things back together. Off camera, I've gone ahead and installed the new engine mounts. Anyway, the next step is we need to work on getting the harness for the 750 engine put in place. The ECU is wired directly to the engine, but you know, we need to have basically everything that goes from the handlebars down into the engine area routed in and ready for engine installation. Once we get that done, we can actually go ahead and test fit the engine, get everything kind of put into place, and start setting in everything harness wise for the engine and kind of getting that routed. Let me show you what I got so far with regards to the harness, technically the throttle cable and some electrical harness. I utilized the old kind of sheathing from the X2, and that also has a built-in rubber seal, so and that is specific to this platform. The 750 actually has a different size bracket. Oh, the other thing we're gonna have to kind of deal with is the fact that this throttle cable for the 750 is much longer than that of the one that came on the X2. So I'll have to kind of do some creative routing once we get it down in there to make sure it's not, you know, bending at too severe of an angle. That way we don't have any like kinks in the cable or anything. I think this is kind of more or less where I'm going to want it, because the carb setup is going to be like right here, and this I think will nicely put us right in the neighborhood for, you know, like I said, where we need it. Now these wires right here, they don't need to run too far down just because they plug in to the harness that's separate. You know, it's nice that they actually did that for the 750 generation. For the X2, nothing plugged in. There were literally no plugs. It was only like everything just hardwired. This is actually the one that goes to, or like for the starter, the start kill control. This one I think is basically just going to be floating there, because this one I think was basically for the trim. Now, of course, this gasket is pretty critical because it prevents any water that splashes up over the front from getting down into the engine compartment. So yeah, we've got that. We've got the throttle in place. I actually kind of like where the throttle is. I think that'll work really well, like I said, for the output shaft. And you know, it's got this structural member here, but which is what my nickname was in college. But it's not going to interfere with anything, I don't believe. I had mentioned we're going to make a couple of reliability improvements on this engine before putting it back in. One, get rid of the crankcase relief valve, and you can see it's partially still there, but underneath it is a block-off plate. So basically the only reason that structure for it is still there is because it needs to be used as a washer. That valve can leak after a while, and then you end up pulling water into your crankcase if you have any down in your hull, and it comes into the engine. Or it will just create a vacuum leak at the very least and make it run terribly. The other thing that I did is I removed the direct injection oil pump. That is normally right here, and then that has a direct oil line that feeds the carburetor on the other side. I took that off and applied the block-off plate. You can get a kit for basically both of these to be able to beef up some reliability. So we'll just run premix fuel for this engine from now on, as opposed to what the normal setup is, which you just put regular gasoline in it and then it direct injects, which is very nice as long as the pump's working, but when the pump doesn't, you fry your motor. Okay, cool. Well, good news. We have the 750 engine in place, as you can see. Now comes the part of tackling all of the items for packaging this 750 into a jet ski that was not intended for this engine. Meaning, The ECU, like I have mentioned previously, that is going to kind of be a bit of a packaging situation. All of the harnesses that ran to the ECU, from things like the electronic tilt control and the tachometer and the fuel level gauge and the oil level gauge, all of that ran through this harness. The harnesses are, you know, intertwined with one another, but all we actually need is from this to this is all we need, but we need to package the rest of this, so we'll just zip tie it off. The other thing that we need to do is to put this up in place. This is the coolant temperature sensor that I had mentioned previously. I think I can actually mount this somewhere up in this vicinity, and I'll modify this screw to make it double-sided, because these holes are all, you have to screw into them. Utilizing one of those will require that there is not a head on this bolt on either side. Basically, first I want to get it test fired, make sure that all of this stuff actually works in this layout, and then we can start super nicely packaging everything once we know for a fact that everything that we're doing is going to be happy in an X2. I kind of ran into an issue. So this 750 carburetor is set up a little bit differently than the 650 carburetor, and the main difference is this line right here, which is called the pulse line. For context, this is connected to all of these hoses right here that go back to the fuel tank. Now this pulse line on the 650 connects right here to the intake manifold, just near the reeds. On this jet ski, on the 750, there is a line that connects near the diaphragm over to here. So it's self-contained within the engine. Basically, I think what's happening on the 750 is vacuum is provided, the diaphragm gets moved, and then fuel pressure is pulled in as a result. My guess is we're gonna have to put this on that intake manifold, because this whole thing right here is effectively like a fuel pump. It's like a pneumatic powered fuel pump, and it needs to see some pulses to begin flowing fuel. And without that, I don't know if we'll have sufficient fuel pressure or fuel draw. All right, actually, after looking at the 650 carb, which is this, if you look at the diaphragm part of the carburetor, you can see this hole right here. I believe that's a vent, and this also might be a vent as well. So we might have to run the port where that vacuum line goes to the diaphragm area of the 750 carb just as a vent, and then put that pulse line straight onto the intake manifold, same as it was for the 650 setup. Okay, just to show you where we're at, I took the pulse line from the fuel pump and put it all the way around and removed this line, which was going from our carburetor diaphragm to the pulse line. Yeah, basically, like I said, I think the 750 basically just had a different way of pooling fuel. Additionally, I got the feed line and return lines hooked up with some fresh new hose clamps, as you can see there. We did get the throttle hooked up as well. Check this out. Got a nice trigger throttle on this now, as opposed to having the old thumb style throttle. All right, so now that the carburetor is all bolted down and the lines are hooked up, we can move to finishing up the electrical. Starter wire, the battery positive and negative, and then connect the ECU to the start-stop switch, and then throw in the 12-volt battery, of course. From there, we can do a test crank, not a test fire, but a test crank. I just wanna make sure that everything electrically is happy. And of course, as you're watching me do this, just note, this is in the prototyping phase. I'm not gonna have everything nicely bundled up and tied up with our wire ties yet. This is just to do an initial function check and make sure that all is good. So I don't want to make it all pretty and then have to rip it all back up. Alrighty, well, we officially have everything hooked up electronically. Obviously, like I said, it's, you know, very prototypey at the moment. As you can see, everything is hooked up. Spark plugs, battery. We have the start kill switch hooked up. Literally, that is the only thing we need. We have this entire harness here all bundled up. And all we needed out of that was this, and then had to go through this entire harness, and then this right here to go into the ECU. I just wanted to go ahead and do a quick crank check just to make sure that it does crank, that the ECU is powered, and the ski acknowledges that this engine is here. So with that, I just put the kill switch in, and I have not yet hit the start button. Hopefully when I hit this green button, something happens. Let's find out. 3, 2, 1. Ooh, that's awesome. Things happened. Let's do that again. All right. I would take that as a good sign that things are at least electronically hooked up. The one thing I don't know, by the way, and this could totally foil my entire layout plan, is if this system is a wasted spark system, meaning that it sends spark to both spark plugs for each fire. So the X2 was originally a wasted spark system, just very unintelligent. It didn't know which cylinder was at top dead center. It just knew every 180 degrees, one of them was at top dead center, send the spark. This one may or may not be more intelligent. I don't actually know. But if it is, and it doesn't do wasted spark, then that's a problem, because the ECU was behind the engine on the 750, and I have it in front of the engine on this layout, and this is the shorter spark plug cable, and it will not reach to that back cylinder. So you see the problem. We will have to make up some slightly different layout to be able to get this spark plug to reach that back cylinder if it doesn't end up firing, of course. The only thing to do now is to kind of finish bundling things up. I may or may not make things clean looking. I don't know. I probably won't make it super clean looking quite yet. But I am going to put the exhaust on, and then I think we can go ahead and put some fuel in it and see if this thing fires up. So let's get to it. Alrighty, so let me show you where we're at. We are basically at the stage of putting fuel in it and test firing this puppy. Let me tell you what I just did. So I just put the exhaust in. The ECU is basically, I think, where it's going to be. And it is like pretty locked in place right now. Like I'm like actually trying to move it, and it's not really moving. Also, this is the coolant temperature sensor I was talking about. I mounted it up on the top like that. I just cut the head off of a bolt and utilized that so that I could thread it up in there. So basically what happens is now coolant will go up into it. The ECU can check the temperature, and then it will go back out via normal means. So let's throw some fuel in this bad boy and see what we see. Okay, now for the big moment. So this may or may not require a bit of cranking to get fuel up and through it. We did it. Yes! You guys, I'm so freaking psyched. We've got the jet ski running. The 750 is in place, and she is ready to rip, I think. The last little confirmation that we need to actually do is hook it up to the garden hose, which is a way to basically simulate cooling water going through it without having it in the water. So we will do that primarily just to check for leaks. This engine is not freshly rebuilt. We don't need to do that for braking purposes. All we need to do is run it and confirm that, yeah, like I said, we're not having any leaks and that there's not going to be any hot spots anywhere in the engine room that could be close to any of the wiring or things that we don't want getting hot. Now, of course, the downside is I got a little bit overly excited about this project. It's currently November 10th, and this thing is done, and we can't ride it until like April probably, maybe even May. Reason being, I live in Ohio and it's already cold here. It's a high of like 55 today, so no one's taking any jet skis out on the lake anytime soon, unfortunately. But nonetheless, as long as everything checks out with our hose check right now, we're gonna have a spicy unit to be riding on the water come springtime. All right, well, here we are. We got the garden hose set up, and you can see we got water coming out of the exhaust pipe. So basically, I'm just gonna keep doing this for several minutes. I'm just gonna check and make sure that the battery's charging, make sure that things aren't getting too hot where they shouldn't be. And other than that, I think we can call this thing good. Of course, check for leaks, like I said. Spilled a little bit of water when I put the hose on, so that's why there's a few drips. But aside from that, I'm not seeing anything. All right, well, much time and many zip ties later, we have what I would consider to be basically a finished product, point one. We will, of course, in the springtime, give it a test ride, put it through its paces, and change things as necessary. But for now, I think all of this, with the way it's laid out and the way everything is, restrained, all the wires are held back, yada yada, should be good. But we will, of course, like I said, have to put it through its paces and make sure that's the case. I think we can call this project done. We now have an X2 that is meant for a 650cc engine that now has a 750cc engine from a much spicier jet ski in it. It also now has a kill switch, which the original X2 did not have. When you were falling off of this relatively unstable jet ski, which happens quite often, you have to just hit the stop button on the way down into the water, otherwise it will just stay on and continue to idle away from you sometimes. So now we have a kill switch, which will drastically help with that situation. Plus, we also now have a trigger throttle, which is a big improvement over the original OEM thumb throttle, which, like I've said, can really wear out your hands after some sustained riding. All right, well, thank you guys so much for tuning into FunAhead TV and watching along on this X2 engine swap build. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It really helps my channel out a lot. Also, please comment below if you've ever ridden something like this, or if you've ridden a stand-up jet ski like it, or if you just like jet skis. Let me know. Let me know if you like seeing this kind of content. Of course, it's quite a big departure from the typical Porsche content that I usually feature on this channel, but I just kind of like to work on anything and everything, and this happens to be anything and everything, and like I said, I love jet skis, so figure every now and then I will throw a jet ski related video on the channel. Thank you all so much for tuning in to FunAhead TV. I super appreciate each and every one of you. Yes, you're the best. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next video. Oh, hey FunAhead friends and family. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see even more great FunAhead TV content, please click the suggested video right here. I'll see you over there.